Hi everyone, it's Jenny. I just finished reading Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, which was released earlier this week, so I want to bring a quick book review to talk about whether it's worth reading and checking out or not. So Ali Hazelwood's new book, Deep End, just released this Tuesday, February 4th. So this is being filmed, I've lost track of the days of the week. It's being filmed like 4 days after. I got the book as soon as it came out on my Libby app through my library, and I just speed read it through it, and I just wanted to chat about it. So if you're deciding whether you want to add this to your TBR for later or to read it immediately, or whether it's worth waiting a 16-20 week hold on the library, or if it's something you should buy now, then I will share my thoughts on the book and hopefully help you make that decision. To start off, Ali Hazelwood books are very predictable, so I went in with certain expectations. First, knowing there would be a certain amount of geeky humor for sure. I've read Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically by her, and they've all been very like women in STEM focused, so the jokes have been on the side of, like physics jokes and I think biology jokes too, so I was expecting some of that. But at the same time, I thought she could have been trying something different this time around, because this is actually her first sports romance book. So we'll get to the premise a bit more very soon. But being her first sports romance book, I didn't know if we were going to come with the same type of humor, the same subjects. I assumed it was going to be a lot more obviously sports based. So I expected like an interesting change of pace from her normal STEM focused books and plot lines. Going into the premise of the book, Deep End is framed up as this romance story that follows two competitive athletes who go to Stanford. So the first is Scarlett, who is a competitive diver in her junior year, and the male protagonist is Lukas, who is a competitive swimmer, and he is in his senior year at Stanford. Honestly, the book summary and description doesn't give away too much about the actual story. They just say that the two of them somehow have this like secret that comes out, and that's how they end up falling into each other's paths. So a lot of unknowns going into the book. I naturally was very excited for this book. I talked about it in my 2025 anticipated releases video, and part of that is because I dabbled in a little bit of competitive swimming when I was younger, so these aquatic style plot lines are much more up my alleyway than like other books that have been really trendy lately, kind of like, I don't know, probably some hockey romances. Even though I did grow up watching hockey, being a Canadian, it's like mandatory. Swimming was much more up my alley, so I was really excited to see what Ali Hazelwood would do with this setup for her characters. And all that being said, let's get into what I enjoyed about the book. The first absolute biggest observation I had is I was able to read this book in just like probably one evening and the evening after work. So it was a very, very quick read. And only after finishing it and looking at my Storygraph app, I realized that it was a 460 page book, and it didn't honestly feel like it. So Ali Hazelwood did very well with the pacing of this book, and she was able to keep the plot line moving along and keep everything dynamic, so it didn't feel too much like it was dragging. Because I've read some longer books where you really felt like you knew you were in for a longer book at times. So 460 pages absolutely didn't feel like it. I think you could easily crush this book in a couple of hours. The biggest difference in Deep End versus her other books that I have read, like Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically, is that I think she took a very big leap in the way that she structures her stories this time around. It is definitely her most female protagonist focused story. There's a lot of time spent on the character arc of specifically the main character of this book, Scarlett, and actually not too much time spent focusing on the romance line. So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind when you're checking out this book. For me, that is right up my alleyway. I prefer my romance books to be like that. Like I want more focus on the main character and her own arc and her own struggles in like life, school, career, all of that, with the sides of like those romantic scenes kind of sprinkled in throughout. So I thought that was a very interesting move on her end. She had started doing some of that, of course, with showing like different struggles of her other main characters being like women in STEM and experiencing, the toxic world of academia and all of that. But in this one, for sure, there was a lot more going on with subplots about her diving career, her upcoming MCATs, being a pre-med student, and also like with different dynamics going on with her various friend groups as well. There was also very good scenes about like honestly therapy and trauma, so that was an interesting exploration. Overall, this book ended up being a pretty good representation of burnt out gifted kids, which I actually don't relate too much to, but I know a lot of people in my life who probably would. So if that's you, then I would really recommend you check this out. You would probably relate to the protagonist quite a bit. So I just alluded to this, but what I did enjoy about the book as well is Ali kind of kept to her known geeky, like STEM related elements as well. So the main character is studying for her MCATs, and it is built into the story. So she does manage to drop in some kind of nerdy humor bits here and there. And that's always like a fun little Easter egg for anyone who enjoys the typical Ali Hazelwood style. And this isn't too much of a spoiler. I'm really going to avoid them. Just when you think that she is going to write a romantic novel outside of things that happen in a science lab, she'll give you some little scenes here and there of it, which I thought was hilarious. Like, she stayed true to herself. Because of this, there are also these consistent Easter eggs that she's kept throughout her other books, where she has other couples of hers from various books make guest appearances throughout the novel. So they're really Easter eggs for her true fans to find. So I always love that. I think that's a really fun opportunity. Overall, the humor element behind this book just hit it out of the park. So if you're looking for a very good rom-com, I would recommend this. The characters are very quippy, they're funny, they're awkward. There's a lot of moments where you can definitely laugh along with the book as you go through it. The final piece I'll bring up is I thought that the coach and athlete dynamic was so smart and very accurate in the way it was written in this book. The coach is constantly, pushing the athletes and being like the meanest person ever, saying the most aggressive things and just never being nice about the things that they're doing. But it's all fun and games in the end. And it's just a very funny kind of like straight face dynamic that they have. It's funny to see the athletes always trying to get out of practice and out of training, which is honestly the biggest mood. So I love that little bit about the different relationships that were in the book. All right, so there was a lot of positives. Let's move into some of the pieces in the book that I didn't really like. I think Patronus is gonna drink my tea, so that is not allowed. That's not okay. So I'm gonna hold him here. So what did okay, he hates being held. So what did I not like about this book? First of all, I do think this probably is one of her weaker romance storylines, and I hesitate to say that because in the start of her book, she actually does say that this was one of her favorites to write, and I fully respect that. I think this very much is a personal preference. So what you'll see as soon as you open the book that is not shared in the actual premise on the back cover and how it's marketed is that this book is actually quite, obviously adult like other Ali Hazelwood books, but the spiciness is very like niche towards specific areas, and she'll tell you that in the book as well at the beginning in case it is, a trigger for anyone. So it explores like very different like spicy topics, and to each their own, I guess, but I think too much of the romance line was based off of that specific topic, and it wasn't very much about like actual, I guess, romance and such. Like I wasn't as sold on why in typical Ali Hazelwood fashion the male character is always like has been into the main character for so long, even before she knew he existed. That's kind of her classic thing that appears in every single book she writes, and in this one I was less sold on it because it just, the background wasn't selling it, and it was a bit more based on just like spice, basically. I also think that the main guy didn't have a very good character arc. He always was framed up in her mind as this like perfect person who had their life together, was very cool and collected. And I think this is a book where they would have honestly benefited a bit more from using a dual POV, which I know Ali doesn't really do. So it's not a strong negative, but I think there would have been benefits to adding a little bit of perspective so that the male character kind of came through a bit more as both like good points and also flaws to make him more into like this human-like character. Another thing that is not an immediate red flag, there are no immediate red flags to this book that I would use to discourage you from reading it, is there's a lot of jokes made just at the expense of the main guy being from Sweden. And I think that humor flies because it's just another like European country, and like people are different but similar enough to your average like American, where this takes place in Stanford, obviously. So there's nothing like xenophobic about it, but it is kind of cringy. So if you cringe at like overly American focused humor where they kind of just make jokes about other people's cultures and anyone who's slightly different, look out for that. I thought it was pretty funny the way they executed it, but at some point it's like, okay, we can stop joking about this guy being Swedish. Like the jokes are getting a bit old. The same as how you would see people joke about, like when British people show up and everyone's like, have some tea and crumpets. And it's like, okay, that's not an accurate view, and it's an overused joke at some point. It's actually not as bad as that. Like she gets some pretty clever quips in, but just know that a lot of it is based around his background of just being like a Swedish guy. The next few things that I enjoyed a little less, I'm not going to say that they're spoilers, but there are elements in it. So if you're sensitive to spoilers, I'm going to add a little like sign up here, and you can just kind of skip through. I'll also add sections into the video, so you can just skip through this portion if you want to experience everything brand new, because I'm honestly that person who avoids like any sort of spoilers whatsoever. So at one point there's a very interesting secondary character, and she is Scarlett's kind of new developing friend. The whole book kind of hints at her having a very interesting and potentially very negative character arc, but then it all ends up wrapping up very like fairy tale core without enough explanation into why certain things happened and why, she became a better person and all of that. So I think that there was a lot of opportunity that Ali could have had to make a really good secondary character arc, especially with 460 pages. So I feel like that's something that I'm hoping to see more from her in the future in terms of getting better at expanding those secondary characters. I think that's what really sets apart some of my favorite romance authors. So Emily Henry specifically is able to capture like friendship dynamics and secondary characters and their struggles really, really well about, what they go through their personal career, like family, whatever struggles. And Ali Hazelwood was so close to it in this book. So my expectations are high for her, and I just wish it went a little better within the book Deep End. Another piece that's just for myself is we have a typical romance structure to every book and every movie. I really had my hopes up at one point because the book was, I literally remember checking on Libby when I was reading on my phone, and there's that progress bar, and it was 97% complete or something like that. And I really thought that we had got away from the third act breakup. So I thought Ali was going to try something very interesting and write a book where they don't need to just like tear the characters apart and then bring them back together within like 2 or 3 pages. And I thought she was getting somewhere with that, but then in the end she did slot it in. I totally get it. That's how the typical structure works, and that's how you build more tension in the plot and in the story. I think at that point, 90% complete, almost done, I was really interested, and I was like, I would be satisfied if the book ended with at least like the romance plot the way it is right now. So that's just a personal thing. Finally, I think anyone reading Ali Hazelwood type romance books wouldn't be too fixed about this, and I've never been too fixed about it. I've always enjoyed her books as just like a fun time, but do be prepared for little bits here and there in the plot, especially at the beginning of the book, where you think it might follow through and appear again later, because it seems almost like a hint on, this specific event that's going to happen is going to lead to the two main characters ending up in one scenario with each other where it comes up again and is relevant again, and then it never happens. So there are some loose ends or some potential foreshadowing that never actually ends up being foreshadowing, which if you don't like, I don't know, I don't read these books to think too hard and analyze everything, so I really wasn't that fixed on it. But it is like there are some glaring loose ends that were not wrapped up, or some glaring kind of setups that were not used in the end. So that was a bit disappointing, because I think there were some good opportunities in there. I also wanted to take a moment to compare this book with a few similar books that I've read. Overall, the most accurate comparison, which is very obvious by the way I've been talking about it, is if you enjoyed other books in this Ali Hazelwood cinematic universe, then this fits really well into that overall setting that she has with her characters and the setups and the schools and academia and all of that. Like, it fits very, very well. However, if you're looking for other comparable books, then I would actually bring up Talia Hibbert as one of the suggestions. So those are the books that I think most notably Act Your Age, Eve Brown, but that's out of like an entire Brown Sisters trilogy. And the only book I haven't read from the trilogy seems like it would fit best with this book, and that one is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. And the reason I think it fits is because it sounds like Dani Brown's story is more focused on her being a very career focused and driven woman, and that fits better with this premise in Deep End being like a burnt out competitive diver, pre-med, like everything in her life is chaos and going on at the same time, and she needs to do perfectly at everything kind of vibe. So that's what I would compare it to, even having never read the book, because knowing the other Brown Sisters trilogies, the vibe and the writing fits, and it's just that kind of character setup and character characteristics, honestly, that seem like they fit best between Dani Brown and Scarlett. I also think, and this comes from, honestly, as Ali Hazelwood being from the fanfiction universe, if you enjoy fanfiction, you would probably enjoy her books in general, seeing as she is a writer there herself. That's another comparable, not comparable book, but just like comparable dynamics that you would get from her books. Overall, I would say that it was very strong altogether. There was an excellent pacing, and there was just a fantastic kind of focus on the main character, Scarlett's own struggles and own arc and her journey to becoming, you know, a not so traumatized and perfectionist person all the time. And it's her kind of getting over that hurdle that she has for herself. I think that, again, it's not my favorite romance book that Ali Hazelwood has put out, but because of the other stronger elements, I think this is a very good almost like inflection point in her writing career, where there's an opportunity for her to better meld her past kind of romance writing elements into her new, almost like contemporary fiction and character focused elements together. So I'm really excited to see what she's going to come out with in the future as her writing continues to grow. So now it comes to the question, would I recommend this book for you to read? I think the obvious answer is yes, I would recommend it. I didn't post the rating on my Storygraph yet because I know a lot of you follow me there, but I would rate it a 3.5 stars. So what I mean by that is it was a very fun and enjoyable and funny book to read. So if you're in a reading slump or you're looking for something lighthearted, a good rom-com or something to just, you know, spend a day on the weekend going through, this would definitely be the book for you. However, I would say if you're currently stuck on like a 20-week, 30-week hold in the library for this book, like I am for a lot of new releases that come out that are popular, would I recommend, you know, rushing to the bookstore to buy this book yourself to read as soon as possible? I would say you don't have to do that. I would say you can wait for this book and just keep it for like a rainy day. There's nothing revolutionary that you're missing out on. If you are an Ali Hazelwood fan, scratch all of that, just go grab the book and have a good time. I hope you enjoyed. I want to do a few more of these, especially with all the books I pointed out in my 2025 book release book. So I want to get all of those books as soon as I possibly can and put out reviews because I think it's just a fun discussion to have. I've had the same questions myself sometimes on with these new releases and with our ride or die authors. Are these books something that we need to run to the nearest bookstore to buy, or is it something we can kind of wait and just ride the wave and just watch the hype come out and not feel too much FOMO about? So I will be back with another similar book release in the coming months because I think there's a lot of new books coming out between now and July. So I'm hoping I can get my hands on all of them as soon as possible. As someone who doesn't buy a ton of books and tries to keep my collection minimal, it's really just like a Ticketmaster competition for me on Libby. Like I just refresh my Libby library catalog the whole day until I see the book get released. And then I'm trying to compete with everyone else to get that book first. But hopefully I can continue doing that on a timely basis so I can come out with these types of videos, and I hope you enjoyed. If you also have the chance to read the book, let me know how you feel about it in the comments. I would love to hear about it. And of course, if you have other recommendations or other thoughts about Ali Hazelwood's books and her general style of writing, then let us know as well. I really enjoy reading the comments. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. I think the next one you'll see is actually going to be from Connie, so you can look out for that. And then I'll be back with a bit of a different topic. So get excited for that too. Goodbye.